Hello, it's me, Aaron, and today I want to talk about something I've recently noticed. The old Souls games, Dark Souls and Demon Souls. They were amazing, but differently than the others. I don't like them the same way I like the more modern Souls games, and I wanted to know why, and this video is the result, dissecting my love for the old Souls games. So first, I'd like to talk about the environments and levels. So, in the modern Souls games, I'm not really getting lost anymore. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in Dark Souls 3, in, I don't know where, but almost all the areas work. So you go on the main path, and there is a side path that goes back to the main. You interact with a few levers or maybe doors, find one or two hidden items, open a shortcut, and then you're at the next bonfire. And after you've done all this, I have to ask, did you get lost in this level? Because I sure didn't, and the only thing that came close to the feeling of getting lost is just me discovering an area for the first time. Every level in Dark Souls 3 was pretty straightforward. I didn't really have any difficulties going through the levels, except from the enemies. And now, let's compare this with an area from Dark Souls 1. So, Blighttown. There are just so many different ways to go, so many hidden items, so much verticality, and it's just great. Hollows shooting poison at you from the other end of a platform, a weird, gigantic parasite in the middle of it all, a giant wheel that can get you at different levels of Blighttown, two different ways to enter it, and I was getting lost, like really I couldn't find my way around, and it was really hard, and it still is. You have to constantly pay attention to where you're walking because of how thin some platforms are, and then sometimes the platform itself would move. It was so memorable and unique. It's just awesome to not only have the enemies be a threat, but the level itself, and even more than a threat. There were just so many unique interactions, lore, and gameplay gimmicks. For example, in the Swamp of Sorrows, you can hit a ball of slugs to make them fall on the ground and drop the Moonlight Greatsword, and there's a neat animation when you pick it up. Since Fortress has traps, Duke's Arc has stairs, the Crystal Cave in its invisible bridge, killing a giant to prevent it from throwing giant fireballs at you while fighting the Iron Golem, and a six-sided sorcerer in the depth to prevent him from boosting the Gaping Dragon. Having to equip the orange charge ring to go through Lost Idolith, which forces you to unequip one of your two rings for some of the area. Having no bonfires in Yolando, it wouldn't make any sense to have a bonfire in a flooded city that plotted to smother the flame. The ghosts only being able to get attacked by using a really specific and limited item. Them also floating freely across the wall and floor and the constant threat of water/gravity death, and the anatomy of the level changed by a midway event that is not flooding the other half of the area, and having to equip the Abyss Walker ring to fight the Four Kings to, again, take one of your two ring slots. And all of this just contributed so much to making the areas of Dark Souls 1 feel unique. Almost all of them had a gimmick that made every level truly unforgettable. Now compare this to Dark Souls 3, or even Elden Ring. For me, the feeling of mystery is almost completely lost. There's none of that strange, really specific, weird uniqueness. Dark Souls 3's and Elden Ring's areas are just so clear and smooth, too straightforward, too simple, too convenient. More bonfires and warping at the very beginning, no more backtracking. And honestly, in the recent games, dying and having to come back to my body just feels different than in Dark Souls. In Dark Souls, I was scared of getting lost on the way to my body because of the long distances between bonfires, and the amount of ways I could unintentionally go to, thinking that was where I died. Like, backtracking. After killing Quelaag, you have to make your way all the way back to Firling Shrine, on foot. And my god, the feeling you have when you finally get there is priceless, and I haven't felt it in any other games. And now I'm actually questioning the fast travel mechanic being a good feature. Now you don't even have to really know the environment like you did in Dark Souls 1. You don't go through it as much, you don't really get attached to anything except for the hub and a few areas. And I now think that I stand on the bad feature side. Fast travel is robbing us from this unique to Dark Souls 1 feeling of being lost and helpless, or to feel happy and rest when you find your way out and finally arrive in the safe area that you know. And this is reinforced by not having a map, only relying on your senses and the environment to guide you. In the modern Souls games, there are also just less environmental hazards, like for example, the poison in Valley of Defilement in Blighttown. They slow you down, fully, compared to the other games who either don't do it, don't go all the way or added a horse. But there are also just less enigmatic interactions. I mean, is there anything comparable to the parasitic wallhugger in Blighttown, the fair lady, or getting a massive egg tumor? Yeah, I'm talking a lot about Blighttown. Like, the wallhugger really stuck with me. Like, you're just going through Blighttown with no health left, you're scared, and then in the distance you see a blurry thing, pulsating, little white strings coming out of it. You get closer and you see this, like, what is that? It was so weird and I loved it. I didn't know what to do, I was confused all the time. Why can't I hit those enemies? Why is there a message in the air? Oh my god, I can walk there? The way to enter the DLC, the painted world, the entirety of the painted world. Do you get what I mean? And in the modern Souls games, I'm just not feeling like this anymore. And now, because I'm not going to mention them later, the Covenants. I love them. Like, look at the Grave Servants. How can a Covenant description be this long? And the Chaos Servants having questions attached to them is awesome. Too bad there were no such Covenants in Dark Souls 3. And too bad Elden Ring didn't have any Covenants. And now coming back to the levels. The level design is just the cherry on top. Connecting all of those amazing environments together really makes them all shine brighter. Like, how many times did you have a moment where you were like, oh my god, I'm back here? Like, everything is connected in such a great way, everything makes sense, it feels real. And I'm not even mentioning the amazing and just indescribable atmosphere of the worlds of Dark Souls and Demon Souls. And all of this makes for a truly unique experience. And now, if you get rid of the enemies, Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3 would lose a lot of their difficulty. But Dark Souls 1 still has things to show other than a beautiful view. But anyways, talking about enemies, this allows me to transition into bosses. So, gimmick bosses were pretty frequent in Dark Souls and in Demon Souls even more so. And the boss fights in general were quite simple in terms of attack patterns, and often revolved around some gimmick or puzzle. The bosses would complement the challenge posed by their environment and level, but not outwitting the level to the point of eclipsing it and sending as an independent, more significant challenge. And beating the boss of a level in those games actually felt like conquering the environment more than the boss itself. So what I'm trying to say is that, no, gimmick bosses are not underwhelming because they're not a super hard and fast humanoid boss. And even though I like the complexity of the boss fights that began with the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, gimmick bosses are just different and good in their own way, but I also understand that they're less good in the recent Souls games because of From Software simplifying their level design. Less connectivity, shortcuts, pathways, etc. Because yeah, it would be a bit underwhelming after a big hallway of Dragon Slayer armor to have a boss that consists of, I don't know, spamming a weapon out like 5 times. But still, I'd also appreciate it if they didn't compromise the totality of the boss roster a Souls game has to offer of real bosses like people call them. I would like it to have those more gimmicky, less action-oriented boss fights be implemented back, maybe as a final to especially excruciating and intimidating levels. Would be, I think, very refreshing. But one thing that happens when those gimmicky bosses are implemented back is most players will rank those as the worst bosses, simply because they're not Lady Maria or Artorias. While some of those bosses are fun, I actually think having more challenging and complex boss fights can hurt a Souls game, because the quality of half of those hard, complex bosses will suffer from it. I mean, just look at Murgo's Wetness, or the Moon Presence. I would have preferred it if Murgo was a gimmick boss fight. I mean, to her theme, to lore, nothing sounds like a hard challenging boss, and she isn't. She's really easy, she's not aggressive, she's quite slow, and she doesn't do a lot of damage. That's because of her lore. They couldn't have made her a super cool fast-paced boss, because she's just not like that. Not everything will be a good action boss, because bosses still need to be consistent with their lore, and I think all she needed to be a great boss could have been a gimmick. And personally, I prefer a gimmick boss than a bad action boss. And something I noticed as well is that people often just don't care about the lore or atmosphere of a boss fight. For example, even if Mikolash wasn't the best in terms of being an exciting boss fight, I still loved his fight. The music, him constantly talking and howling, was just such a cool and weird moment. And maybe he wasn't Lady Maria, but he was a unique experience nonetheless. But I know that the majority of players are centered on bosses, much more than on environments. Only a niche of players are interested in such a topic, and From Software is also responsible for this process. It's not just the player base losing brain cells and certainly only liking big swords. FromSoft did it, by 1. Simplifying the level design, but we already talked about that in the first part of this video, and 2. Adopting a faster, more reflexive and action-oriented combat. But now, I believe in the possibility to partially revert this process. Nothing prevents them from going back to more radical level design choices, and I'd love to see such a reinstatement. Just think how much a level with the radicalism of the Londo would add to the most recent games. And should they put this emphasis back on creatively intimidating levels, I think players would be more open to diverse, underwhelming boss fights. And I just wish FromSoft would make some old Souls games again. Or I don't know, maybe you could travel back in time and kidnap 2006 Miyazaki. Oh, and one last thing, Bloodborne have both Dark Souls 1 and 3 DNA, like a fusion of modern and old Souls-like, and it turned out super well, even though some awesome moments were a bit ruined by modern Souls-like energy. Like when you wake up in Yahagul and you're lost, oh my god, what is this place? And oh wait, there's a lantern right there. And I'm a little sad Bloodborne didn't dare to make me backtrack and actually feel lost. Anyways, thank you for watching. Your presence till the end is appreciated. And bye, I guess.